Hello, hello, hello. Happy Wednesday. Hello to all of you on Zoom. Looks like we have a light tasting this week, but that's okay because we're still going to have some fun. Welcome to our Wednesday Zoom blind tasting. For those of you who are on the call, if you can put all of your thoughts, questions, comments into the chat function, I will monitor it and we will talk about some blind tastings. If you can guess all four correct, you will receive a fermented t-shirt. You can either have a Natural Wine Festival t-shirt or you can have just a regular fermented t-shirt. But if you can guess all four of them right, you win yourself a t-shirt. So let's go ahead and get started. I know you guys have done blind tastings before. We're just going to go real quickly over the basic procedures, using visual, aromatic, and taste observations to evaluate the wine, evaluating for quality, attempting to decipher the grape and the origins, or just for preference. And tonight we're going to try to evaluate for the grape variety and the style, and then you can guess the regions as well if you would like to guess the regions of the grapes. So let's get started. The 5 S's of our blind tasting: see, then swirl, then we sniff, get a big old whiff. You want to get all of that aroma into your nose. Then we're going to sip. Think about what you're savoring. Think about what you're tasting. Swish it around, good 5 to 10 seconds in the mouth. You want to get it everywhere in your palate because your taste buds are at different points within the palate. And then lastly, we want to savor that wine. Think about it. Close your eyes. Think about what you taste, what you smell, what it brings to your memory as far as those tastes and those smells. And there is no right or wrong. All of our perceptions of taste and smell are completely different. What I think smells like a banana, you may not think smells like a banana. What I think smells like an orange, you may not think smells like an orange. So with that, again, no right or wrong. Think about what you're catching as far as flavor profiles. And then when you're thinking about that, think about the style of the wine. Think about the grape that you think it might be based on what you've had before, based on what we're going to talk about here. So real quick, just to talk a little bit about styles. For those of you who have been around Fermented for a while and on these wine tastings, you know that the styles that we talk about are a little bit different, but a little bit similar to what's out there in the broad wine world. We try not to think about varietals. We try not to think about regions too much because we want to think about style, because style trumps varietal and region. But it's important to know about varietal and region as well. So in the regional breakdown of wines, you have the Old World, the New World, and the Ancient World. Old World is, Europe, Spain, Italy, France, Germany, Austria, those places. Ancient World, we're looking over in, Georgia, in that Eastern European part of the world. And then New World is everything else that you would think of: South America, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, United States. And that really used to be indicative of the style of wine that you were going to get. 20 years ago, you could look at this map and you could, based on France, based on Italy, based on Spain, based on the United States, you kind of knew what you were getting. But with the advent of technology, with global warming, with all of these factors that have kind of come into play, wine writers, there's a 100 different things that we could talk about on to why this happened. But there became no real old world and new world style. There now became an international style and a traditional style. At Fermented, we like to call that modern style and traditional style. And this is classically what we would have referred to as new world and old world. But now, because of all of those factors that we can't really get into right now, it doesn't really have a geographical definition anymore. You can have modern wines from France. You can have traditional wines from France. You can have modern wines from California. You can have traditional wines from California. And then when we get really into it, we throw natural into that mix of styles. And you can have any of those styles from any region. And that's really what we find people gravitate towards, is the style versus the grape varietal or the region. So characteristics of the traditional style. When we say lighter bodied, we just mean in juxtaposition to what the modern style is. It doesn't mean it's wimpy. It doesn't mean it's watery. It doesn't mean it has less flavor. It just means that the mouthfeel is not quite as rich. The alcohol is not quite as high. And that's the biggest point in that body style. It's more restrained. It has lower alcohol. And again, not all traditional wines are going to have these characteristics, but versus their modern counterparts, if you take a modern Cabernet versus a traditional Cabernet, the modern Cabernet is going to have more fruit, more alcohol, less acid, and more intensity. The traditional style Cabernet is going to have higher acid, less fruit, a little bit more earth, and probably a little bit more tannin in there as well. Although modern wines can have a lot of tannin, as can traditional wines, because that is less about style and more about the skin contact length of time and the type of fermentation methods employed during the pump overs, punch downs, micro-oxing. There's a bunch of factors that go into why wine has as much tannin as it does as well. But generally, the traditional wines are going to have more of those flavor profiles versus the modern wines. So think about that as we're thinking about the grapes and as we're thinking about what we're trying to identify here. Is it a modern style? Is it a traditional style? And then what grape is it? And then for fun, if you can figure out the region, we'll get the region as well. All right, so let's talk about the grapes. We could make you guess out of the 2,000 grape varietals, but that's not a whole lot of fun because there's so many grape varietals out there and it becomes so confusing. So we're just going to narrow it down for the sake of time and for the sake of our own sanity, trying to figure out what these grapes are. These are generally considered the noble varietals. Noble varietal means it's grown in a whole lot of places. It comes from an ancient place. It's been grown for a long period of time, and a lot of people know about it. So let's call it the A-list of wine grapes. It's what everybody's making in different parts of the world. When we look at whites, you have the, big three: Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay. Riesling, also very classic, noble, ancient varietal. And then you have ones that we're not going to talk about tonight: Gewürztraminer, Viognier, Moscato, Chenin Blanc, and Semillon. Those are generally considered the white noble grape varietals. As far as red, no surprise, you see Cabernet, you see Malbec, you see Merlot, you see Syrah, Nebbiolo. Oops, I went too far. Sangiovese, Grenache. Those are all the red noble varietals. And for tonight's purposes, they were not highlighted, but I'm going to skip to them real quick because I was on the wrong screen. So we're going to talk about the 4 red grape varietals that we're going to focus on after we talk about the 4 white varietals. I looked at it beforehand, but I did not catch that part. And thanks to Leah for all of those really cool graphics as you watch this tasting. There's a lot of fun animations that she threw into the slide deck for us tonight as well. So let's talk about those whites. Chardonnay, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc, and Pinot Grigio. That's what we're going to focus on tonight. If you haven't poured it in your glass already, go ahead and get a little bit of number 1. Wine number 1 we're going to start with. And we're going to talk about, as you're tasting, the different characteristics of each grape varietal. And again, these are generalizations, so there's always exceptions to these rules, but generally these are what you're going to find in these grapes. Chardonnay, usually medium bodied. Acid is generally medium. Alcohol can range depending on the region, depending on what the producer's going for as far as that style. If you're closer to 12%, you're going to be in that traditional style. If you're closer to 15%, you're going to be in that modern style. And the flavor profile is going to be different based on that alcohol level, because the flavor profile of the wine changes as the sugar levels change in the grape. That's directly related. Aromas and flavors, generally yellow apple, tropical fruit. If it's picked more in that modern style, you get some butter. If it undergoes malolactic, the butter is a part of that secondary fermentation process, not the Chardonnay grape itself. Chardonnay isn't buttery by nature, and you know that if you've ever had an unoaked Chardonnay that did not see malolactic fermentation. Vanilla usually is going to come from the oak treatment, which is generally indicative of the grape Chardonnay. Again, vanilla is not a natural flavor profile of the wine. That's going to be a secondary additive when you're talking about the oak treatment of that wine, especially from new oak. Riesling, the body is generally lighter bodied, not as rich, although if you're getting into some sweet Rieslings, it gets much more unctuous and rich, and lots and lots of different flavors, because the alcohol levels or the sugar levels are going to be higher, the alcohol not necessarily. Really, really high acid. That's why they make sweet Riesling, because the acid can be so high that it can be so bracing that you need that sweetness to counterbalance the acid. If you've ever had a sweet and sour soup, it's the same concept. You have the sweet, it balances the sour. Those things in a perfect combination are absolutely beautiful. Alcohol is generally lower because, again, either there's a little bit of residual sugar or they're picking earlier so that the acid isn't as intense. Aromas and flavors, lime, green apple, peach, floral, steel, honey. Petrol is the one that you really want to focus in on. Almost all Riesling has some hint of like a gasoline petrol component to it. And the lime and green apple on the young Rieslings also really, really kind of a telltale sign. And then really, honestly, Riesling is probably the easiest of all of these to pick out in a blind tasting because it's so different than the other three. It's going to be closest to Sauvignon Blanc, nothing like Chardonnay and Pinot Grigio generally. So getting into Sauvignon Blanc, light to medium bodied, high acid as well. Alcohol can be anywhere from 12 to 14%, depending on the region and the producer, sometimes even less than that. Gooseberry, which most of us in the United States have never had. It's something that's really popular over in the UK and other areas in Europe. Green apple here again. So you've seen apple in all three of these, and we're going to see it in the fourth of these. So apple, very indicative of all of these, but generally a different kind of apple in each one as you get to tasting them. White peach in the riper versions of Sauvignon Blanc, wet stone, grass, sometimes cat pee, which can be confused with that petrol aroma from Riesling sometimes. So it can be a little bit tricky as we're starting to get into some of these, and they do share some characteristics of each other. Pinot Grigio, light to medium bodied, usually has a little bit softer acid than both Riesling and Sauvignon Blanc. Alcohol can range 11.5 to 13.5. You generally don't get really high alcohol Pinot Grigios. The wine becomes really terrible when it gets to that ripeness level. The other wines can handle a little bit more ripeness, but the Pinot Grigio grape, because it's naturally low acid, when it gets really ripe, it gets really flabby. Although I have seen some really cool late harvest Pinot Gris, but that's a different story and a different concept. Aromas here, apple, again, wet stone, pear, lemon, peach, more indicative of Pinot Grigio. Floral notes sometimes, hay sometimes, and also really kind of soft, round, and juicy versus angular that the Sauvignon Blanc and Riesling are going to be. And then Chardonnay can range kind of from Pinot Grigio acid up to almost Sauvignon Blanc acid, again, depending on that malolactic fermentation. We've hit that a couple times. If you don't know malolactic, it is the secondary fermentation where the acid is softened, essentially. That's the easiest way to explain it. It's a bacteria that is allowed to do a secondary fermentation in that wine, and it softens the acids so they're not sharp. And then the buttery is a secondary component to that malolactic fermentation. All right, so let's get into the wine. Appearance, we're going to look at it, see what we see as far as color. Generally, when you're doing this, the proper way is against a white backdrop so that you can see the change in the color from the center to the rim, and that will give you an indication of age, but we're not getting that deep into wine tasting today. So I would just look for color, because Chardonnay and Pinot Grigio generally tend to be a little bit darker in color than your Sauvignon Blanc and Riesling. Again, there's a lot of factors that can change that, but in general, those grapes are going to be a little bit darker in color. You're going to sniff now. Again, get a big old whiff. We're going to talk about some flavor profiles. Whatever you're getting in the wine, put it into the chat function. Alex, feel free to hop in and give your feedback and tasting notes as well. And, you know, right off the bat for me with this one, very herbaceous is the first note that I get on this wine on the nose.
Yeah, I have something to share. If you want to go back one slide really quickly.
Yep, absolutely.
I do a lot of blind tasting. I'm a very competitive person, and I like it because it's kind of a competitive outlet for me when I'm, you know, trying to guess whether or not I've got the right wine. One thing I always focus on with white wines when I'm trying to narrow down what it might be on the screen, the two middle grapes, Riesling and Sauvignon Blanc, are what we call aromatic grapes, as in they are very intensely aromatic. What that means is when you stick your nose in the glass, it really jumps out at you as something that is, it's right there. You don't have to really stick your nose all the way in the glass to find out what you're smelling. If it really jumps out, it's probably an aromatic grape variety. The other two, conversely, Chardonnay and Pinot Grigio, are what we call neutral grape varieties, as in you really kind of have to stick your nose all the way in that glass to find out what you're smelling. So as you smell wine one, try and think, does this really jump out at me, or do I have to go searching for something? So that's all I'll say.
Yeah, no, great point. That is absolutely right on. And, you know, to me, it's a very aromatic wine. There's a lot of flavor going on in there other than just the herbal notes. You're also getting some fruit in there, some bright fruit, lemon, lime. You're getting a little bit of floral in there as well. And give it a taste if you haven't already. Again, remember, savor it 10 seconds, swish it around, try to get it to every part of your palate. Really think about what you're tasting. Close your eyes if you need to access memory of different things that you've had in your life, herbs, floral, fruits. And that's kind of where we get those flavor profiles from. We're accessing them from the memory banks of our taste and our experiences. And then think about it, savor it, enjoy it. And again, the number one question that you have to ask is, do I like this or do I not like this? From there, go back here and kind of look at these. You know, what flavor profiles are you picking up from this? Did we get tropical fruit? I didn't really get tropical fruit from this. Did we get a gasoline flavor profile? No, I didn't really get a gasoline flavor profile from it. Pear and peach. Did we get pear and peach? Did we get gooseberries? Did we get green apple? Did we get yellow apple? Did we get lemon lime? For me, it's a lot of lemon, a lot of lime, a lot of herbal notes, grass. There is a stone component to this as well. Very minerally and very, very delicious is the most important thing here. Yum, yum, yum. All right, we're gonna wait till the end to figure out what they are. So just think about it, write it down so you don't forget it, and then we'll come back and see if anybody got it right at the very end. You're gonna have to guess before we do the reveal. Yum yum. I love that one. All right. Oh, wrong one. I'm failing at the slide deck tonight. All right, wine number 2. Appearance. Look at it. Is it lighter in color? Is it darker in color than the first one? Alex, what are the color profiles that you're usually looking for as far as in the court tastings? What are the different ways that you would describe the white wine colors?
Sure. So there's a general guideline that I like to go by when assessing wine color, and that is all wine wants to be brown. If you leave a red wine and a white wine out on your countertop for a long enough period of time, both of those wines will end up basically the same shade of brown. So when I'm looking at a color, I'm trying to figure out, is this pretty clear, pretty bright, generally indicating a young wine, or has this changed its color a little bit? Is it starting to become more copper? Is it starting to show signs of aging? Typically, that interaction with oxygen is what gives that wine its color. So if it's spent time in oak barrel, wine tends to be a little darker in color. If it hasn't seen any oak barrel, it tends to be brighter, lighter, and fresher. So wine number 2 is a wine that I would call clear or pale straw is really the color indicator that I look for. And that to me would lead me to believe that this is a pretty young, pretty youthful wine. And that kind of helps me narrow down where I am in the world and kind of who would make a wine of a style like this.
Yep. Absolutely correct. And is it darker than the first wine, or is it the same as the first wine? What did you call the first wine, or what would you have called the first wine?
I would call both of these pale straw.
Pale straw, both of them.
When so what that does is this actually helps me. I now know that the color is relatively irrelevant when I'm trying to decide which of these wines is which grape. Yep. I know that I need to go off of other things like the smell of the wine, the flavor of the fruit of the wine, and the structure of the wine. Structure is what we call acidity, alcohol levels, and in white wine, if there is some sort of bitterness to it, because certain grape varieties can be bitter, certain grape varieties are not terribly bitter.
Yep. And depending on when they pick, it can lead to more bitterness or less bitterness as well, the heat of the vintage. All right. And the nose in this, there's definitely a lot less going on than in the previous wine. And as Alex mentioned, you have 2 aromatic varietals and you have 2 neutral varietals in that kind of box that we're looking at this evening. Now, in the flavor profile, in the taste, go ahead and get a nice little swig of it if you haven't yet. And yellow apple is the very first thing that I get from this wine on the flavor profile. Beautiful, kind of perfectly ripe, crisp yellow apple. Also just a touch of vanilla in there, and really, really beautiful balance. The acid isn't too high, the acid isn't too low. It's right on point. The start is beautiful. The mid palate is beautiful. The finish lingers for a really, really, really long time. So going back to these flavor profiles, typical characteristics of the white grapes. Man, it just keeps going on and keeps going on and keeps going on. That is really, really good. I always forget how delicious this wine is till I taste it every single time. And I think every single time I taste it, I say, man, I forget how delicious this wine is. Yum, yum, yum. You get anything else from this, Alex? Flavor profile wise?
I think you were right to talk about the apple flavor of this wine. One other thing that I look for in white wine, at least the way I was trained, all white wine has some kind of apple flavor. What kind of apple flavor is largely driven by style and grape variety, which can point you in the right direction for guessing the wine. So this to me is golden apple for sure, but it's not like apple pie, right? It's not baked, it's not heavy, it's not dense. It's more of a crisp, a really fresh golden apple. So I like that. I like that descriptor a lot. Some other things too that I'm paying attention to with this is when I stick my nose in the glass, the first thing I smell is kind of a tart creaminess, like a yogurt or sour cream or creme fraiche. If you're familiar with French sour cream, it smells a lot like that to me, and that's a really big indicator for what style of wine that this is, because there are only certain kinds of white wine that go through that process Adam was talking about, where you take some of those tart acids and turn them into lactic acid, which is that smell of butter or cream or yogurt.
Love it. Yeah. All right. Well, take another couple sips of that, finish up what you got, and let's get ready to transition into red. Write down what you think it is first wine, second wine, and we're going to talk about red. So we talked a little bit about the noble varietals, and you all have probably had these. You all have probably seen these, and they're amazing grapes. And a lot of them can be very similar, especially in this kind of right-hand corner of the diagram. Cabernet, Malbec, Merlot. Those are what we would call the Bordeaux varietals because they all kind of hail from Bordeaux. They all are usually blended together in Bordeaux, and they come from Bordeaux, and they've spread all over the world. You now find them everywhere that wine is planted almost, and they have similar characteristics. There's a reason that they've grown these grapes together in the same soil for centuries. There's a reason that they've blended them together for centuries. And so they are distinct, but they can share very similar characteristics as well. And they also complement each other very well. And then depending on style, Syrah can be very confusing. Tempranillo can be very confusing. Grenache, Sangiovese, and Nebbiolo gets a little bit easier because of the acid and the different flavor profiles that they can throw off versus the bigger, richer, fuller bodied wines in that right-hand side. The ones on the left are usually higher acid as well. And for tonight's purposes, we're going to talk about 4: Grenache, Pinot Noir, Malbec, and Cabernet Sauvignon. So those can be a little confusing because, as Alex was talking about the neutral versus the aromatic in white, here we have Grenache and Pinot Noir, which can be very, very similar. Grenache is known as hot climate or warm climate Pinot Noir. Malbec and Cabernet Sauvignon can have some very similar characteristics as well. And so starting with Pinot Noir, probably the easiest, and Nebbiolo. Pinot Noir and Nebbiolo are the two easiest red wines to nail in a blind tasting because of their color, because of their acid, because of the flavor profiles that they have. Light to medium body for Pinot Noir, generally soft tannins, generally a lower alcohol level, higher acid level, and some very telltale fruit components: strawberry, cherry, raspberry, cola, mushroom, and clove. Again, depending on where it's coming from, how it was treated during the growing season, and when it was picked stylistically. We forgot to talk about styles on the last two with the white wine, so I'm going to back up real quick to talk about the styles of those different grapes. Well, we talked a little bit about it in the flavor profile. So Chardonnay, generally, if it's going to be traditional, it's going to have a little bit more of the brighter fruits. And then if it's modern, it's going to have more of the tropical fruits. And they're all kind of that way because when you go from traditional to modern in the growing season, you change the flavor profile of the finished wine because the sugar in the wine is changing. So the traditional wines in white tend to have brighter, higher acid fruits. The modern wines in whites tend to have juicier, sweeter, lower acid fruits. So if you think about the white traditional, you're looking at green apples, you're looking at yellow apples that still have a crunch and a crisp to them. You're looking at lemon, lime, kiwi, higher acid fruits. When you go into modern, you're getting into the lower acid fruits, sweeter fruits. For whites, that would be pineapple, that would be guava, that would be melon, that would be the peach, the pear. And so that's kind of how you distinguish the traditional versus modern in whites. Higher acid fruits in the traditional, lower acid, sweeter fruits in the modern. Same as for red wine too, with these grapes. When it's picked earlier and it's in a more traditional fashion, Pinot Noir and Grenache both have that really beautiful, bright red, crunchy fruit, as we call it, the strawberry, the cranberry, the cherry, all of those really bright, higher acid fruits, raspberries, red fruits. And then when you get into the modern style, you get into the darker fruits, you get into the blackberries, the boysenberries, you get into the sweeter, lower acid fruits. And that's kind of how we differentiate the traditional from modern styles in all of those grapes. So again, Pinot Noir, more traditional, is going to have more of that bright red crunchy fruit. When it's more modern, it's going to have the deeper, darker, richer, sweeter fruits. Same with Grenache. When it's picked early and it's done traditionally, you're going to have more of those red crunchy fruits. The closer it gets to modern, you're going to have more of the sweet dark fruits. Same with Malbec, same with Cabernet Sauvignon, but the exception is with Malbec and Cabernet Sauvignon, they're always going to be darker fruits because of the makeup of that particular grape. Malbec and Cabernet are richer, bigger wines, even when they're done in a lighter style than Grenache and Pinot Noir. And that's part of the physiological makeup of the actual grape versus the style. But when you're getting into Malbec and Cabernet Sauvignon, if it's done in the traditional style, it generally doesn't have as much richness. It has higher acid, and it has a little bit more tannin and earth when it's done in that traditional style. So back up. That was a long rant. I apologize. Grenache, medium to full bodied, can have medium tannins, or it can be soft depending on how the winemaker treats it. Alcohol can get really high in hot climates and clocks in a little bit lower when it's done in cool climates. Thin skinned, both of those, so they generally have a lighter color flavor, or a lighter color when you're looking at the grape itself. And then we get into the darker profiles, the deeper, richer profiles of Malbec and Cabernet Sauvignon. They're both medium to full body generally. Very few exceptions to that. Tannin can be medium to high, and those medium tannins can be softer, or they can be more bitter and more harsh depending on the treatment of the wine during the fermentation process. The alcohol can range anywhere from, I've seen them as low as 12 and as high as 16, but we'll just say 13.5 to 15% for the window there. Malbec, you get some red plum, blackberry, vanilla, tobacco, cocoa. Cabernet can have the black cherry. It's a darker, richer black cherry than you get from the cherry of Grenache and Pinot Noir. Currant, black currant especially. Cedar is going to come from the oak treatment, if there is any. Baking spice is also going to come from the oak treatment, and some graphite with Cabernet as well that you typically don't experience with the Malbec. But again, there's exceptions to every rule. One thing I want to talk about with the Grenache also is that cinnamon, and then the Pinot Noir with the cloves. So you can get those really cool individual baking spices. With Cabernet Sauvignon, it tends to be in my experience, a little bit more of a melange of baking spices than specific baking spices that you can pick up with Grenache and Pinot Noir. Again, oak treatment has a little bit to do with that as well. So let's get into these guys. And we're going to start off with wine number 3. Wine number 3, appearance. Right off the bat, what do we see? It's almost see-through. Not a whole lot of color there. So we could probably rule out those last two, Malbec and Cabernet, on this one, just because of the color of the wine. Now, Grenache can be light-bodied and very light in color, and so can Pinot Noir. So just like we had the aromatic varietals that kind of led us to immediately eliminate 2 of the white wines, here we have a color that allows us to immediately eliminate 2 of the red wines, in my mind anyways. Get a whiff, get a big whiff. Alex, what you picking up in this one?
All right, so you know how I was talking about all white wines have apple? All red wines, I've been told, have some form of cherry to them. So it's trying to narrow down, there is cherry in this wine, what kind of cherry is it, right? And at least for me, on my palate, this is like a tart sour cherry, almost like a cherry candy, where it's got that sweet fruit, but also that sour backbone to it because of that elevated acidity in this wine. That to me is a really clear indicator of where I'm going when I'm trying to figure out what kind of wine this is.
Yep, absolutely. Bean cherry. Soft tannins, they're there, but they're really soft and mild. They dissipate pretty quickly. I also get a little bit of I think it's mint on the nose as well, with that bright, really nice cherry, a little bit of cranberry in there as well. All right, what do we taste? Does it taste like it smells? It does indeed taste like it smells. Man, that's yummy. Higher acid for a red, but not, too intense. Really, really well balanced. Soft tannins, lighter bodied. We'll jump back here, let you look at Pinot Noir and Grenache. You can look at Malbec and Cabernet Sauvignon if you want to, but I think we all but eliminated those 2 from the running on this wine. Man, that's yummy. It really is. I haven't tasted this wine in a long time, and it is really delicious. All right. I think you've had enough time to think about that one. Let's get into wine number 4. Finish up what you got in your glass. Let's get on with wine number 4. Well, right away we can see in the appearance that it is much darker in color than our predecessor. And to me, the nose is a little closed off. You got to really get in there. There's not a whole lot coming out of it right off the bat. So that's why we swirl a little bit more. We want to get a little bit more oxygen in there. We want to try to awaken those chemical compounds and esters that are going to give us the smell of the wine. And now get a little bit more. Definitely some darker fruits. A little bit of like a wet forest floor, wet soil. And now we have more tannin as well. So tannin, earth, dark fruit, medium acid. Again, the tannin is the dryness on the very back end of the wine. All right, let's back up real quick. See what we're getting from this guy. Alex, what are you getting fruit profile wise on this?
So you can see how the cherries can change pretty dramatically. For me, I almost get like a cherry, like a black cherry cordial, or those fancy black cherries you buy for old fashions, almost cooked in their own syrup. There's some ripeness to this wine. There's some darkness to this wine. That definitely points me in a certain direction. The other thing to keep in mind with this wine too, that'll tell you a little bit, thicker grape varieties, thicker skinned grape varieties tend to leave a little bit of residue on the rim of your glass as you kind of swirl it. It's what we call staining. So one thing you can do is you can actually take your glass on a white sheet of paper and kind of set it against your table and roll that glass back and forth. And if it leaves a little bit of residue behind, you can see that color still, even though the liquid is gone. That's what we would call a wine with a lot of staining. And that typically points you in a direction of what grape variety is used. I don't want to give it away because it would definitely give it away. But we can talk about that at the end.
Or it might mean there's mega purple in the wine, but not if you're fermented, because you would never find a wine with mega purple in it.
You are so right, Adam.
We would hope that there wasn't any wines with mega purple in it at fermented. We try to keep them away from you as much as possible. There's a couple that we might be suspect of, but we're not for sure. But yeah, right on with that staining of the inky quality of this wine. I get a lot of plum out of this, like a dark, really beautiful plum, and a little bit of I can't figure out what herb it is, if it's thyme, if it's
definitely a savory
almost.
herb. I'm getting like a sage out of this wine.
Sage, yeah,
like a sage call. Underbrushy quality to it.
Yep.
There's a French word for that sort of wild, scruffy herb called garrigue, Garrigue. If you ever see that on your wine tasting notes, if you Google something online, that's what that means. And then they're also probably snobs, because who uses French words when they don't have to? Just call it sage.
Or underbrushed. Yeah, yum. All right. Man, those are all fantastic, I have to say. I think we picked a good lineup. All right. I'm going to give y'all just a couple more minutes to think about it, and put your guesses into the chat function on what you think Mystery Wine 1 was, Mystery White 2, Mystery Red 3, Mystery Red 4, and then also what your favorite was, because that really, at the end of the day, is the most important thing. It's fun to do blind tastings. It's educational to do blind tastings. You can learn a lot doing blind tastings, and you can also really hone your palate with blind tastings. It forces you to think outside the box. It forces you to leave preconceived notions of what you've experienced with certain grape varietals in the past. And it's a lot of fun as well. But again, there is no right or wrong when it comes to what you like. You can't guess that wrong. Every time you're going to guess it right, as long as you're being honest with yourself. So if you're going to guess, now is the time to guess. Maybe we don't have any guessers today. I haven't seen anything go into the chat function the whole time. Oh, there we go. We got a guess. All right, Natalie.
Nice. Thank you, Natalie.
Beautiful.
One thing too that I like about blind tasting is don't second guess yourself. If you've got a really strong gut feeling right when you stick your nose in that glass, you're like, this has got to be Chardonnay. Don't let that lead you astray. Sometimes going with your gut can be the best way to do it.
Yep.
All right, Natalie, we just need your favorite real quick. There we go. Perfect. Always my favorite tasting. Perfect. 1 Sauv Blanc, 2 Chardonnay, 3 Grenache, 4 Cab Sauv. Gotcha.
All right, ladies. Great guesses on all of these, and I am glad that you had your favorites for sure. Alex, what was your favorite of the tasting before we do the big reveal?
I was pleasantly surprised by wine number 3. I think that's a really nice bottle of white wine, especially when you come back and figure out how much it costs.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, this is tough. I am going to say, in this moment, on this day, for me, it was wine number 2, which is surprising because I hardly ever pick that grape varietal as my favorite wine of the tasting. All right, let's get to the big reveal, and it is, ta-da! We have number 1. Sauvignon Blanc from Willamette Valley from Division Wine Company, La Frontière. Number 2, Brea Chardonnay from Mr. Chris Brockway. Number 3, Rickshaw Pinot Noir at $15. We just dropped the price on this, put it on the value wall. For $15, this Pinot outdrinks any other $15 Pinot on the market without question. The balance, the just beauty of it, it's really, really dynamite. It surprised me how awesome it is right now. And then number 4, Malbec from France, from the Cahors region. This is Comble La Serre, and that's our lineup. You guys almost got it right, Natalie. Good try. You just missed the Cabernet, being Malbec. Monica, also great try. You were super close as well. Y'all are awesome. Thank you so much for your support, both of you, Natalie and Monica. We really, really appreciate you being on these Zoom tastings. Hope you had an awesome time on Sunday. I think you did. I know we did. And next week, don't forget, Bilbo Brothers, Idlewild Winemaker Zoom series starting. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we're glad you love these tastings because we love them too. We're going to figure out how to transition once we get the store next door open. I think we're going to still offer like a hybrid Zoom tasting. I'm just trying to figure out exactly how to do it, but we'll figure it out, and it will be a lot of fun. And we can't wait to see you over there. We can't wait to see you again next week if you can make it. And we can't wait to see you before next week if you need wine before the weekend. Come get some of your favorites. Prices on all these La Frontière, very limited. I think we've only got 6 bottles left, $27. Brea Chardonnay, $21, still the most popular Chard in the room. Rickshaw Pinot Noir, $15, and then the Cahors comes in at $22. So this lineup is all dynamite, value-driven, amazing varietals. And Monica, her town in Alex, the town in Portugal is, I don't know how to pronounce that. And Alex says thanks, and I'll stop.
She came by earlier and was trying
doing
to
the play-by-play.
The beach resort town in Portugal where she stayed, Cascais.
Oh, nice, nice. Well, ladies, have a wonderful night. Thanks for hanging out with us. Alex, thank you for all of your wonderful input. And we will see you the next time we see you, and we can't wait. Have an awesome, awesome rest of your night and drink some great wine. Bye.